Welcome back, everyone. We're here in Texas at Content 2020. We're sitting down with BJ Arnett. Now, she's a producer, she's a college professor, she's also one of the CEOs of CAPS Productions. And BJ, it's a real pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
And I wanted to talk to you about some of the work you do, because what you're doing is, I think, merging together a pretty successful business with the values you have. And you found a way to, one, transform yourself, but also help others find their better selves through the work you're doing. You've helped a lot of people, actually. I guess just to start, can we talk about generally what you do now with CAPS and some of your other work?
My husband and I are CEOs of Camy Arnett Production Studios, which of course is after his name. And you know, we have enjoyed 22 years of marriage and 23 years of being together and building. And building. We really understood that we were to captivate the airwaves. So we have an understanding of how important getting good, healthy, strong, value-based messages about the love of Christ to people. And every day I have some task within our organization to do. I don't separate my life, if you will, from being his wife, to being mother, and actually grandmother, being pastor. All of those things come together. But I'm also a college professor. I'm chair of my department. And all of those things mixed together give me a real strong understanding of everything it takes to run CAPS.
Now, I know that you've helped a lot of people through your work. I mean, I've met some of your crew here.
Yes.
You have a good crew here. And I mean, you mentioned one of your camera guys. You met him in a park,
We met him in the park. and you know, I love to cook.
Yeah.
And we were doing a ministry outreach in the park. And he loves to eat. And that's how we got him. And that's how we got him.
Who doesn't like him?
Exactly. And so a friend brought him over, and he gave us an understanding of what he wanted to do in his heart of hearts, and we just nurture people. But we saw that every person that God brought us is an integral part of the vision that God gave us. So we didn't say, okay, let's step out of this community called the family of God and look for professionals already ready-made. We said, let's train, let's raise up, let's take the time to spend time with these people and look inside of them to see what perhaps is the creative gift God put inside of them that we can help elevate. And once we help pull that out of them, they bring that gift and talent to Camy Arnett Production Studios. So the gentleman that we're talking about, Reagan, had never picked up a camera, had never edited, had never done tracking of footage or anything like that. He understood that he wanted to do whatever it was that told the story of the goodness of God. And we explained that that could be exemplary through his excellence in this field. And when I say to you, he's picked it up, the demonstration of him picking it up is that his, I'm trying to get the numbers right, 13-year-old son, I believe, is now doing the very same thing.
Oh, wow.
So that tells you, you know, if you will take the time to love on somebody, to spend time with them, to pour into them, you're going to get out of them exactly what God put in them to give. And not only you affect them, but you affect their generations to come. His son, as my students would say, his son is a beast. He's absolutely amazing. He's absolutely amazing. He writes, he produces, he directs, he edits, he shoots, and he's 13. So, you know, it's kind of, it makes me smile to know that we not only affected Papa, but we affected his children. And they will continue to affect the next generation, and next. 7,000 generations and more is the promise. We want all of that. So we have to start here.
Now, the process of nurturing someone and also finding someone's talents when they may not even see it in themselves. That's an interesting process, especially for a business.
Yes.
One that you've managed to be successful with.
Yeah, I think my husband says it best. He used to say this a lot with this team when we first began. He would say, if you can't see it, see yourself here. See yourself through my eyes. Because we can see for you where you're headed, because it has been revealed to us that your greatness is there. And here's your track. But if you get to a place where you don't feel secure, people deal with insecurities every day, then don't look at yourself through your own eyes. Look at yourself through our eyes. Who's saying to you, you can? Who's saying to you, no, you will? Who's saying to you, you must? Because what you do today affects everything that's coming. And you know, we have done things like we've married them. You know, it's like Reagan came, and then years later he met the woman of his dreams. We married them, and then their first baby, we were there. You know, we were there, and it is not just building a business; it's building a community, a family that you gotta care something about people in order to have the strongest business, if you will, because the business has its fluctuations, up, down, up, down. When it's down, you need everyone in the team to be able to still see up. And that's what we've been blessed to be able to have, is that people who will continue to be able to see up, so that we don't ever stay in a lull. We keep moving.
Now, the process of finding that in people, I think, takes a lot of empathy. And I know that you've gone through some difficult times yourself. So did we interviewed Carmen, your husband, as well. His story is incredible. Being successful, losing it all because out of principle.
Yes.
And then building himself back up. I know that you as well have quite the story.
Well, you know, I have been very blessed. I was raised with my parents in one house and my grandparents next door.
Oh.
And my parents, my stepdad and my mom, both professionals. My mother was an educator, worked a lot in the political scenes, a lot with the board of education for Kentucky. My dad, a amazing artist, but also a self-taught engineer. He designed the very multifaceted air conditioning systems for GE that now are on these very large buildings.
Wow.
8th grade education. So that's what I come from. My grandpa, Primitive Baptist minister, 3 churches. When I was 5 weeks old, he put me in the car with him and said, bye-bye, this is my grandbaby. And my mom said she didn't see me again until I was 13. But I traveled with him. And every little church he went to, you know, he didn't always get a check. He would get an offering, maybe $25, and 2 chickens, and 3 pies, and a gallon of tea, and Sister so-and-so made me a dress. And, you know, I learned that relationship really was better than money. I learned that spending time with people meant that you loved them. The more time you spent of quality, the more relationship you were building. So I learned that from my family. And when my husband and I came together and we began ministry together, I really understood it. There were times in my family that we didn't have anything. Us kids didn't know it. We did not know it. Our parents never let us see when we didn't have. Because if anybody in our household wasn't going to have anything, it was my grandpa and my dad. Myself, my sister and brother, we never knew. When we got a little older, like preteen age, and I'm the oldest of our siblings, it became a point of training. We do not have this amount for groceries. So we will have to teach you how to make a meal plan. My mother taught me a meal plan at 9 years old. I could cook. I knew how to make the shopping list in order to have very nice meals every day without fail. I was never lacking but it was because they didn't accept lack. My dad, who years later became this amazing engineer, originally owned dry cleaners. I remember in the 60s being very little, and I couldn't have been more than 5, and the race riots broke out. And he put me in the dry cleaner van with him, and he took me to the dry cleaner because he was afraid to drop me off at school. And I sat on the counter, just like this. I sat on the counter, and I would receive people's tickets, and I'd hand them to my dad, and the race riots were boiling. He put me in the van. He went to get boards, these large boards, and I didn't know what was happening. And he came back to the dry cleaner, and he boarded up the glass windows of the dry cleaner. I'm maybe 5 or 6, yeah. And he boarded up the glass windows, and he wrote in with black paint, "Soul Brother," so that those race riots would not just totally destroy his business. The man next door with his business, who was not African American, I watched my dad help him put the same wooden walls up on his windows and put brother. But everybody knew my dad, and they knew this man who happened not to be African American, but he was a friend of the community. Those are the kind of things it's ablazed in my memory. Hard times I brought on myself as a teenager, as a young woman, stepping out to experience life and not knowing that all my life I had experienced the right life. So college messed up more than you can even imagine. The first term of school, I didn't even go to class, and when I did go, I was asleep. Because why? Because I was studying Morehouse and Georgia Tech because they had the cutest boys. I wasn't in class. And then that aha moment came that my grades were going to go home to my family. You can believe this young woman's mind shifted, because who wants to disappoint the parents who have done everything they knew to do? And I began to get an odd job and work for scholarship pageants and get scholarship money, and I paid the debt of the classes that I had flunked, which was the first term. And when the second term came, I doubled up on classes. My parents didn't find out what had really happened until I had paid the debt. Because I knew my mother would leave Kentucky, come to Atlanta, which is where I was living, and probably whoop me in front of the entire class. I was clear that could happen to me. So from that, I kind of got a clue. But there were still very painful moments in my life, abusive relationships, where I abused myself because no one made me stay in an abusive relationship. The door is always there. I just didn't have the strength, the character within myself to leave.
There's an interesting trait you find among many religious communities, which is the idea of forgiveness. And one thing I've realized is forgiveness actually goes both ways. There's the willingness to forgive others, but there's also the willingness to forgive yourself. And part of forgiving yourself is changing yourself.
Yes.
I was reading St. Augustine in his Confessions, actually, on this. And someone sent me a quote from another saint, actually. There was an interesting quote. It said something along the lines that basically you find similar traits among saints and heroes, that oftentimes they're people who are willing to take risks.
Yes.
But the saint also said you find that same trait among criminals. And actually the line between saints and heroes and criminals can be very thin. It's just a choice of how you deal with the hardships put in front of you. And I mean, that was something that really had me thinking, and it's making me think about your story too, of finding people and seeing in them talents and values that they do not see in themselves. And helping them to nurture those values, to change them, right?
As a teacher, that's what I do. A young person comes to college, and they have these big dreams of what they're going to be. And they think that coming to college and just sitting there is going to miraculously make this wonderful job appear on their 4th year may when they walk across that stage. They don't realize how much work and effort and time it is going to take. They haven't developed their savvy wings yet, so they don't realize that it's going to take an understanding of how to do. That's my job. My job is to lead and guide them in the how-tos. So some of their savvy may be considered game. So I've got to see the game in them and use it for their own good.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, actually.
You've got to look. Let's go back historically in the church. Martin Luther defied all his leadership in order to set the record straight, which in essence set people's minds free, that the love of God was there for them as individuals, and that they didn't have to have the okay of the Catholic Church. Was he a criminal?
By the Catholic Church, he was.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
But he was also a hero. So we've just got to see it right. There was some savvy in the moves that he took. There were risks. There were death threats. There was the opportunity for him to simply be squashed, not live. But there was a dedication inside of him that wasn't going to let it stop. But how many people died in that holy war?
Yeah.
So we have to consider that right now, you and I, we're making history. It doesn't seem like a lot to us. We're doing what we do. We're having this conversation. We're doing this interview. We're doing what we do. But 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, someone will find this little story that becomes mountainous to them because of what you guys do and how you do it. Will you guys become the hero at that point? It's because you didn't put your savvy down. You didn't put your knowledge and understanding or your excellence down. And somebody took the time to say to you that you're doing the right thing at the right time, and it is getting the results. I believe in that. I believe in the God that allowed me to see that.
Now, talking a bit about some of your work, I know you focus a lot on human rights. I mean, you help a lot of people in this country through your work, but I know you care a lot about international rights as well. What are some of the issues you're focused on?
I think one of the big issues for me is poverty, and poverty of mind, poverty of spirit, and of course, poverty of the belly. You know, we've got to fill the bellies. I love what Jesus did when, people always talk about Sermon on the Mount, but, really, folk just came because they was hungry. Come on now. I think that if we take a look at people around the world and the pain that is happening to people, the human rights issue is larger than the United States. It's larger than any particular country. It is an issue that hits every country. So I am married to a man who is Haitian. And for the first time, this little girl who was raised with a silver spoon in her mouth got to go to Haiti and see what poverty looks like in Haiti, which made me recognize poverty in the urban cities of the United States. I had to go to Haiti to see poverty in Haiti. Because see, we respect pain in other countries, but in the pain that's around the corner from us, we dismiss. The pain that's happening in Haiti, we'll write a check. The pain that's happening in China, we'll write a check. Bulgaria, we'll write a check. And rah, we did that. But the pain around the corner, the pain of the neighbor across the railroad track, whose children don't have internet, and we're in a season that if a child doesn't have internet, they don't have an education. We don't see that. Well, I have a heart for that. We have a heart for that. So we tend to put ourselves in the position of speaking to, pouring into people who other people say, well, they're in America, they're in Atlanta, they're in Texas, how bad could it be? Oh, but those children in Africa. Poverty of the soul is the worst poverty you can have. So we try to fulfill that understanding of the Great Commission right in our own neighborhood and allow that own neighborhood to affect the world. But you've got to start in your own neighborhood. It took me going to Haiti and seeing a spigot coming out of the ground like 6 feet tall, and little children and grown men showering under it. I remember hearing, I thought I saw a little child, you know, under, like playing under a shower thing. And I thought, oh, and my husband said, turn your head. When my husband speaks, I have a tendency to listen. He said, turn your head. I turned my head. He told me, the reason I'm telling you, the reason I told you to turn your head is because the men had to go shower. That's in the middle of the street. We are driving down the street in the daytime. But then I thought about the times that I was in New York City and the children, oh, Lord have mercy. I was in New York and I couldn't have been but in my late 20s. And the, you know, like in the movies, you see these, the firemen come open the spigot, the thing on the street, the fire hydrant. And I don't know if the firemen did it or the children did it or somebody did it, and it was open. And these kids were like playing, and my mother would have never let me play in that. Never. But then you see them playing and rinsing themselves and playing and rinsing. The same thing I saw in Haiti as an adult woman in ministry was the same thing I saw as an unsaved woman in her mid-20s, late 20s in New York City.
I'm curious now, because you've really helped a lot of people. When you go and help these communities, what is it you find that they need the most? And what is it that you find actually changes people?
Listening changes people. Listening changes people. We talk a lot. But if we listen and respond to the need of what we hear without an eyebrow going up or going, it smells in here, or oh my God, I can't sit on this couch. I went to help a lady one day. Who was a senior. And I went in her house and I kept saying to her, you know, let me come see you. And she said, oh no, don't come. It's okay. I'm good. And then one day I just went. And I went in her house and there was a hole in her roof that was no less than 6 feet. And there was a blue tarp over it. Her wall that the couch was pushed against, there was water, like stains of water. But the couch she so proudly had just gotten, that she invited me to sit on, had bugs coming out of it. Now I could have said, oh my God, but I was trying to help her. I sat down. See, we have to listen. She said, oh, I'm so glad you came. She didn't want me to come at first. But when I came, she was shocked. I'm so glad you, sit down. I'll make you some tea. I looked into the kitchen. Another hole in the roof. I looked down the hallway. Disaster everywhere I looked. I sat there with her. And then I went back to my community, my family of God. And I said, we got to help this lady. And our team went and found her family members and said, now look, here's what needs to happen, and we're going to help you make it happen. We got her out of there. We got her tested. We got her help. Her mind was not in clarity where it could have been. But her heart was in full clarity. She knew she had received a friend. She knew somebody cared about her. And all I had to do was listen to her heart, not necessarily her mouth. So I went. because even though her mouth was saying don't come, her heart was saying come.
You know, one thing I'm seeing is that Christians, of course, they talk a lot about love, right? And the love of Jesus and stuff like this. But it seems that showing someone that you care about them can actually, from what I'm understanding from it, can actually help transform someone. And having someone recognize something good in someone can make them transform themselves as well. Is this what you're seeing?
You're absolutely correct. One of the best hugs I've ever had was from her. It's after she got into her new home and her nephew started bringing her to church services and taking her around, and she got a new dress. And I remember the first time she walked into church and she had on a new dress, she had a new purse. And she said, and she patted her purse. And I thought, this is her moment, her proudest moment. But it was when she walked in the door and she saw me and she just came over to me and she just gave me the biggest hug. It wasn't what I said to her. As I said, her mental capacity was not where it should have been. It's how I treated her. It's that all I knew was that if I didn't, who would? When did we stop talking about the love of God and start being the love of God? That's what I needed to demonstrate to her. She gave me, not my husband, not the men in my community, the hug. She came looking for me. And in that particular day, I needed that hug. Why'd you do this to me? Stop it. That's a good memory. So I cried of joy. Because we reunited, this team of people reunited this lady with her family members. And they embraced her. And that nephew took her everywhere she needed to go, visited her. He who said, you know, I'll come to church. I remember the day I saw him in praise and worship, and his head started bobbing, and then his shoulder, and I thought, and he's like every bit of 6'7". You know, he's not a little guy. And I thought, wow, this is how you affect a family. This is how you affect a nation. This is how you affect the world. It's not but what you say. Our children don't remember everything we say. Can we attest to that? But the things that we do, the time that you walk into your daughter's bedroom and pull the cover up over her shoulder and her eyes barely open, and she says, thanks, Daddy. Or she's done something really wrong that she knows that her mom told her not to do, and she comes to you and not her mom. Those are pure moments. Those are pure moments. It's not what you said to her. It's who you are to her. That's no different for people that we don't even know.
Hey, BJ, it's a real pleasure having you on Crossroads. Thank you.
Thank you.